Genesis chapter number 14. In Genesis 13, back before I left and went to Israel, was last time we were in Genesis, we saw the separation of Lot and Abram. Lot chose the cities of the plain because they appeared to him to be much more fertile and inviting, so to speak. And when Lot looked out across the valley to the east, he saw a lush and green land with ample supply of water and grazing land for the herds that he had. And it just looked like a very prosperous place. When Lot looked out across that plain of Jordan, he also saw cities there, cities inhabited by people, and no doubt that this was appealing to Lot. Reminded him, as the Bible says, that this valley of Jordan during that time looked like the land of Egypt. It even compared it to the land of Eden. It was a beautiful, very green place, a very prosperous place. And Lot looked down into those places, and he was reminded, no doubt, of the time that they sojourned in Egypt during the famine with his uncle Abram. And the things that he saw there, with all of that appealed to him. He was drawn away by the prosperity and by the life of ease that it seemed to be inviting, such an inviting place as he gazed out across that plain of Jordan there, looking down into that valley that was so green and inviting with the cities and all of which he could not have imagined having by choosing the rocky terrain, the rough terrain of the land of Canaan. As we were traveling through the land of Egypt, or the land of Israel on our trip, we seen a transition point from going from the northern part up in Galilee and then down into the southern part where now is the Dead Sea. We went from a very green and beautiful area to a very dead and uninhabited, for the most part, area down around the Dead Sea. And now, as we're reading in this time, we realize that these cities of the plain in Lot's day, Sodom, Gomorrah, and these other cities were all in the area where the Dead Sea is today. 5 cities in total were scattered across this valley that the Bible points out in the region where the southern portion of the Dead Sea is at today. In these cities, they were under the rule of Assyria. And if you'll see, I don't know if we got our map up. There's the 5 cities of the plain. But if you'll look at the map this morning, you'll see Assyria. The region of Assyria is all of this over in here. Remember, Abram came from the Ur of the Chaldees, which is right down in here, which is all of this is modern day Iraq. And you'll see Babylon and Nineveh and Haran right here. Remember, Abram traveled right up those rivers, all the way up to Haran and then down into the land of Canaan. Well, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, those 5 cities of the plain right below the Dead Sea, were under the control of the Assyrian ruler at that time, under the Assyrian army. And that nation that was over there, as many of the cities in that area, as weaker places, they were under the rule of the Assyrians. So we find in this passage here, as we go into Genesis chapter 14, we find the Assyrian king, one of the Assyrian kings, coming into this area of Sodom and Gomorrah and overtaking this place. Genesis 14 and verse number 4 tells us that they had been faithful. These cities had been faithful. If you look at Genesis 14 and verse 4 this morning, it says that 12 years they served Kedor Laomer, which was one of the kings, the king of Assyria there, or the king of Elam in the Assyrian region. They served him for 12 years, and in the 13th year they rebelled. So what this is talking about is that these 5 kings of the cities of the plain had faithfully for 12 years paid tribute or paid taxes to the Assyrians, protection money if you'd like. And on the 13th year, given whatever the reasoning, maybe they felt like they had built up their defenses enough that they could come out from under the Assyrian rule, or whatever the reasoning was, the Bible tells us that on the 13th year that they rebelled against the Assyrians and did not pay this tribute to them. And this brought on a military action on the part of this king of Elam, Kedor Laomer. Kind of a hard word to pronounce, a very long name in the Bible there. But the Bible tells us this king of Elam gathered up an alliance of 3 other eastern kings, kings of Assyria, 3 other kings from that area over in the east, and they came to the land of Canaan. Now, if we can go back to the map this morning, the Bible tells us if we track their trip from Assyria over in this area, the Bible tells us that they traveled from north to south as they were traveling down towards Sodom and Gomorrah and those cities of the plains. The Bible tells us that they traveled from the northern end of Canaan down into the southern part, which was a major trading route in those times, known as the King's Highway. It goes along the eastern side, the eastern border of the Jordan River, and down through the land which is on the opposite side of the land of Canaan, known as the Transjordan area. They were traveling from north to south down this trading route, and this trading route was a major trading route for that time that connected Damascus, which is in modern day Syria, way up north, all the way down to the Egypt area, right down to where today the Red Sea is, the Gulf of Aqaba. If you see it down in the southern part, you can't see, it's not mentioned on this map, but Damascus would be up in this area, way up north here. And this trading route went from way up north all the way down to the Gulf of Aqaba here. And here you have the Red Sea and then Egypt over in this area. So it was a major trading route up and down through there. Well, the Bible tells us as they were traveling, as these Assyrian kings or these eastern kings were traveling with their troops, they were overtaking cities and just taking all of the things that they had as they were going to continue to replenish the needs that they had. They were continuing to travel along and take cities as they came to them. They attacked several settlements on the way to their main objective, which was Sodom and Gomorrah and the other 3 cities of the plain. But I want to talk to you today about what we find in this chapter number 14. One of the main things that we find here in this chapter number 14, I want to talk to you today about pursuing your lot. Pursuing your lot. We know that Lot was dwelling in the city of Sodom during this time. And no doubt today, in this building, there is not one family here today, not one family that's represented here today that does not have at least one Lot in their family. Every family is touched by these same types of situations. Me and Leslie was just talking about this last night. And it seems like the more that we talk to people and the more families and the more interaction that we have with different people, we find more and more often that every family is touched by a lot. And you say, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by a lot? When I'm talking about a lot here, that every family has their own lot, I'm talking about that every family has at least one person. At least one person that has chosen the cities of the plain instead of the way of God. They've chosen the cities of the plain, the life of the world, the worldly lifestyle, pursuing the pleasures of the world instead of pursuing God. And I want us to look at this morning in this chapter number 14, pursuing your lot. It may be a son or a daughter in your family. It may be a grandson or a granddaughter in your family that's the lot of your family. That has made a choice to move off and follow the ways and the things of this world and try to soak up all the pleasures that this world has to offer. You may be sitting here today and you see faces in your mind this morning as we sit and speak about this. You see your lot. The lot that's in your family. You see that person in your head this morning. In your mind, this person is a burden upon your heart, a person that's dear to your heart. And you see this person's life, and they're continually seemingly going away and going further and further away from the way of truth and following more and more the path that Lot took, which is the path that leads to destruction many times. Who is the lot in your family? Who is the lot in your family? Think about that this morning as we go into this message. It may be that they've moved down to the cities of the plains, seeking to find prosperity, seeking to find pleasure and sow some wild oats. This lot of yours may be living a life that in your eyes and in the eyes of most all the rest of your family, you see that the path that they are heading on is a path of destruction, a path that's going to end up costing them tremendously. As we see in the life of Lot, it cost him tremendously. But I want to point out a couple of things, a couple of thoughts that came to my mind as I looked over this passage here in the Bible where Abram goes and pursues after Lot. I want you to first of all think about this. Lot, in this passage of the Bible in chapter number 13, when Abram, his uncle, and himself were standing up on this mountain overlooking the land, and Abram says to Lot, he says, Lot, you choose for yourself. And the Bible says that Lot chose for himself. The Bible says that Lot chose for himself to go down into the plain, to go down into the cities of the plain of Jordan. I want you to think about this thing this morning. The first thing that I see in this passage is that Lot made a personal choice to go that direction. Lot made a personal choice to go that direction. You see, Lot's father had passed away when he was a very young man. And Abram had taken Lot in and brought him under his own household as if he were his own son. And he raised him and brought him up from a young age on up to manhood. And we see that the Bible tells us that God called Abram to a land, he said, where I will show you. And Abram followed God in obedience, and Lot went with him. Lot went with his uncle. And then we saw the problems that took place between the herdsmen of Lot and of Abram. And we saw the separation that took place in chapter number 13. And we saw the choice that Lot made. Abram had done all that he could possibly do to raise Lot. He had done the best that he could, but yet when Lot was of age, Lot chose the cities of the plain. I want you to think about this first thought this morning that I find in this passage about pursuing your Lot. Abram did not allow Lot's decision to paralyze him from continuing on with God. Lot was a grown man, and Lot made his own decision to go the direction and to follow the path that he followed. And that path was a path of sin and a path that led to destruction. But yet Abram, no doubt he was brokenhearted as he watched this son, basically his son, this nephew that he loved and had raised from a young age on up. No doubt it was heartbreaking for him to see Lot move him and his possessions down that valley and into a land that would sooner or later, very soon, be destroyed by brimstone and fire. No doubt that broke Abram's heart to see Lot make that choice, yet it did not stop Abram from continuing to walk with the Lord himself. You see, God has a path and has a purpose for each of our lives. And you may be here this morning and your lot is out somewhere. You may not even know where your lot is at this morning. You may not know what your lot is doing this morning. They may be in a bad place right now, living a life of sin. But one thing is for certain, God still has a plan for your life, and you need to continue to walk with God. You see, we find in chapter number 15, as we'll get to this, we see Abram continuing with God as God is making a covenant with him there in chapter number 15. We'll get to that later on. But we see that that Abram does not stop following God even when Lot makes this decision. You know, it bothers me sometimes when you see a tragedy come into a family, maybe with their children, or it may be gone astray, it may be a marriage gone bad, or a death come into the family. And a lot of times you see people during those tragedies, they fall out of church. And they quit coming to church. And I'm thinking to myself, when I see these things, it breaks my heart to see this, because where are we going to find the help and the strength that we need to get through these times? It's in the body, in the family of God, where we find strength to get through these hard times. But yet so many times we see these things, these tragedies, paralyze people from walking with the Lord, continuing on with the Lord. So I want you to understand, to see this morning, that Lot's decision, although no doubt it was heartbreaking to Abram, his uncle, Lot's decision did not paralyze Abram from continuing to follow God in obedience, from continuing to walk with the Lord in obedience. Remember, Lot was an adult, and your lot here today, whoever your lot is in your family today, they are an adult most likely as well, and they have to make their own decisions, and they are also responsible for those decisions that they make. They're responsible personally for those decisions. But I want you to see this as well. Although Abram did not abandon Lot, although Abram did not abandon Lot, nor did he chase after Lot. Nor did he chase after Lot. You see, the Bible tells us in this passage here, look at it. Let's look in this passage. Chapter 14 and verse number 13. Chapter 14 and verse number 13 of Genesis, the Bible says this: "And there came one that had escaped, This was after the kings of the east came and overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah and the other three cities of the plain. The Bible tells us here that there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew. By the way, that's the first time that Abram or anyone was titled as a Hebrew. But the Bible goes on to say, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, brother of Aner, and these were confederate with him. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. Although Abram did not abandon Lot, he did not chase him to Sodom. Lot made his own decision to follow a path of sin, and Abram stayed right where God had told him to be. We find here that Abram was dwelling at the oaks, or this place of Mamre, this place where God had called him to be. Abram did not follow after his nephew into a place of sin, into the place of Sodom. When Lot chose to go that direction, Abram, no doubt, he was heartbroken and probably with tears in his eyes, he said, Lot, you're a grown man. You're going to have to make your own decisions, but I'm going to stay with God. I'm going to stay with God. So we find Abram here dwelling at the place in the presence of God, while Lot is off down in the cities of the plain. But I want you to see something else here. Although Abram did not abandon Lot, nor did he chase after him as he was making his own personal decision to go down into the city of the plains or go down into Sodom and live this life of ease and life of pleasure. I want you to also see that although he didn't chase after Lot, he was always prepared to intervene on Lot's behalf. You see this in this passage here. Look at it. Lot's down in the city of Sodom, living it up, so to speak, until one day when it all started to fall apart. The armies of the east came in. The Bible tells us in these passages here, for the sake of time, we're not reading this whole passage, but the Bible tells us that the armies of Cado, that king of Elam, when his armies came in, that he chased the very kings of Sodom and Gomorrah down into the tar pits. In this area, there were these pits that were filled with tar. And the Bible says that the king of Elam, when he came in with his armies, that they chased the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah down in, they fell off into those tar pits. And the life of pleasure and the life of prosperity that Lot had been seeking began right at this point to start to crumble apart and start to fall apart. And it's at this time, when things started falling apart in his life, that we find Uncle Abram is prepared to step in for Lot. You see, it may be that your Lot, whoever your Lot is not going to be reached, is not able to be reached until things start really falling apart. It may be that your Lot's life has to be in danger as Abram's Lot's life was. before you're able to step in and intervene in their life. You see, so many times we see in people's lives, as long as things are going pretty good in their life, it's really hard to reach them. It's really hard to get to them. They'll reject our counsel. They'll reject our encouragements. They'll reject our reproof. Having a hard time with my words this morning. But we see here that although Abram did not chase after Lot, when Lot's life was in danger, Abram was there, ready to intervene. He was there, ready to step into Lot's life and pull him out of the problem, of the mess that he had got himself into. Do you see this in the passage? Look at it. Abram was so prepared. Look at what he says here in verse number 14. And when Abram heard that his brother, the King James says his brother is just referring to the family relation here. Lot was actually his nephew. It says when he heard this news that Lot was taken captive, what did he do? He had means for which to intervene in this situation. Look at what it says. It says that he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318 of them. And what did he do? He pursued them all the way to Dan. Now, if you were here Wednesday night, we talked about the city of Dan somewhat. We spoke about the location and the things. We were at Dan, the city of, the ruins of the city of Dan, on our trip to Israel. And the Bible tells us that Abram pursued Lot all the way to Dan. That's over 200 miles distance. From way down in the southern part of Canaan, all the way up to the very northern part of Canaan. The Bible tells us that Abram pursued Lot. Lot was down in here when he got overtaken by the king of Elam and kidnapped or taken captive. And the Bible tells us that Abram pursued them all the way up into this area, which is the very northern most point of the nation of Israel today. We took a picture while we were there, if you could put it up, of a part of Dan that has been unearthed in the past recent years. This is one of the city gates going into the city of Dan, and this gate here dates back to the time of Abram's life. It goes all the way, they've dated it all the way back that far. This remnant here is known as Abram's Gate because they believe that if Abram would have entered into the city of Dan, that he would have walked through this very location. And I took this picture while we were there. That's where the gate was actually at. They've had to fill it up to keep it from eroding. But the Bible tells us that Abram pursued Lot for all of these miles. He was prepared to step in. He was prepared to intervene in his nephew's life, in his Lot's life, at the drop of a hat. And folks, let me tell you something this morning. You may not be able to reach your Lot today. You may not be able to reach that son or that daughter or that grandson or that granddaughter today who is living in a life of rebellion. But if you'll stick around and pray that God would open doors, God will make a way for you to reach them. Recently heard someone saying about the prodigal son. Miss Ann read about this morning. A man was telling another man about his son that had went away got off into sin. The man reminded him about the prodigal son, and he says, "Sir," he said, "he'll be back." He said, "I don't know how long it's going to take." And he said, "You don't know what kind of shape he's going to be back and what kind of shape he's going to come back in, but he'll be back." And it may be that your lot this morning, whoever that person is in your family, is going to have to get down into the very bottom of the pit before they're able to be reached. But when they get there, you be prepared. You be prepared as the prodigal son's father. He was standing there waiting for him. He was standing there waiting for him. And not only was he standing there waiting for him, he had a cloak for him, and he laid over him, and he welcomed him back in. Abram pursued Lot when Lot's life was in danger. You see, it would have done no good for Abram to run and chase Lot down into Canaan, down into Sodom when everything was going good. Lot would have said, Uncle Abram, I made my choice. This is my choice. You get on back home and you go back where you come from. As long as things was going good, it would have done no good for Abram to go chasing after Lot. But when things began to erode in Lot's life, that's when Abram could step in and make an impact there. So what happened? Abram pursued Lot all the way to Dan. The Bible tells us that he overtook these eastern kings, and Abram with his 318 men and those that were allied with Abram, in allegiance with Abram, as the Bible talks about in verse number 13, that he had confederates with him. They ambushed these eastern kings, and they overcame them and defeated them, and they took Lot and the other people, and all of the possessions. They took Lot back, and they saved Lot. Abram saved Lot out of these captives' hands. He brought him out of that captivity, and he brought him back, and he put him back on his feet. And then what happened? The Bible tells us not exactly what we would like to hear. The Bible tells us that when Lot was brought back by his uncle Abram, he went right back to Sodom. So many times we see this in families' lives. You go right down the road here to Brother Dow McDermott's ministry, where they're working with people that's dealing with all kinds of addictions. So many times you hear the stories that we brought them out. They was doing good. We brought them out. But they went right back. They went right back into it. That's not the story that we would like to hear in this passage. We would like to hear that Abram went and got his Lot and brought him out, and everything was good from that point forward, but that's not the way the story ends. We know how it ends, that Lot went right back into Sodom. And the Bible tells us that not only did he go back into Sodom, the next time we find Lot, he sang at the very gates of Sodom as a leader of that perverted city. Your lot, you may be able to bring your lot out, and they may go right back where they came from, where you brought them from. But I'm thankful to see that in this passage, that although that took place, in Lot's life, we see Abram's response to this, that Abram still didn't give up, did he? Abram still didn't give up. Turn over to Genesis chapter number 18 this morning. You can never give up on your lot. Never give up on your lot. You may not be able to reach your lot with words. You may not be able to reach them with actions. But let me tell you something. If you can get before God on your knees and intercede on behalf of your lot, we see here in this passage that God can work in that person's life even from a distance. Genesis chapter 18 tells of us the couple of different things, but in context of what we're dealing with this morning, it tells of us the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and what took place there. But the Bible tells us, it shows us here that even when God, those angels and Jesus himself in the form of a human came to Lot's tent, to Abram's tent, and he told them as they were going down into the city of Sodom and Gomorrah to look over that city and to see firsthand the wickedness. The Bible tells us that Jesus, in the form of a human flesh, stayed back talking with Abram. And Abram began to intercede on behalf of his nephew Lot, who he knew was in Sodom. He knew that he was there. And although he knew it was too late for him to do anything as far as him personally reaching out to Lot, he knew that he could get before God and intercede on behalf of his Lot. And his God was faithful. And the Bible tells us, as you already know, that through Abram's intercession for Lot, that God delivered Lot, his wife and his daughter, out of Sodom. Although his wife didn't make it all the way out, Lot made it out. Why did Lot make it out? Why did Lot make it out? It's because someone was interceding on his behalf. Let me tell you something. Don't chase your lot to Sodom. Don't chase your lot to Sodom. It'll end up in more heartache and more hurt. And many times it does nothing more than push them farther and farther and deeper into the life of Sodom. Don't chase them. Pray for them. Pray that God would open a door where you can intervene in their life, intercede on behalf of your Sodom. As we begin to close this morning, y'all would come for a song of invitation this morning.